This is Marketing Uncomplicated. All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Today, I have co-founder and CEO of Anura, proud father of four, and serial entrepreneur Rich Kahn is a dedicated professional with decades of experience in digital marketing. He started Anura, an ad fraud solution designed to improve campaign performance by accurately exposing bots, malware, and human fraud. A lot of interesting stuff to unpack there. His track record of success includes operating a business that made the Inc. 5000 list for 5 years in a row. Some great achievements here. Achieving an Ernst Young Entrepreneur of the Year award for technology and operating one of the fastest growing advertising and marketing companies in the US. Welcome, Rich. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, as I mentioned, I want to take a step back. Prior to entrepreneurship, let's just discuss a little bit of where Rich was before stepping out and launching all of these different awesome companies.
Probably high school.
I mean, it could be right out of high school or during high school. You could have
I
had the
was in high school.
entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, I started
Let's talk about that. I love that.
Yeah, so all right, so just to date little things, the internet, as far as I can tell, was made public in September 1st of 1991.
Okay.
Prior to that, I was in high school. I graduated in 90, so I was in high school, and I built what was called bulletin board systems back then, which was today's website.
Like Blackboard and stuff, right? What some people may know. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And I was also part of the ARPANET network, which was the predecessor to the internet. And it was a much more clunky system that wasn't always on internet. So like if you wanted to email somebody on the West Coast, the problem is you'd pay long distance costs.
Okay.
So as hackers of those days were always trying to avoid the cost and how can we get around it? So ARPANET was born. And the way it worked is my machine would dial into another local server and transfer my mail, collect my mail, and that would dial into another server and do the same thing. And it would do it all the way until you got down to the West Coast or wherever the mail was destined. And it'd take about 5 days. So I always tell people it's fun because, if you emailed somebody, it could take like 2 weeks before you get a response.
But yeah. And that was digital.
Cool. Oh, it was cool though. It was something different. Like, because if you weren't paying the post office to send a letter, if you weren't paying long distance fees, it was just like, wow, this technology is awesome. I was in high school, probably 8th or 9th grade at that point.
Wow.
When I started that. So I just had a lot of fun.
Yeah. So whatever happened with that company?
Oh, that was a project.
Just something for fun for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I used to get free games and stuff like that. And, because people would log into the system, upload free games. And I would, so in high school, what do you like to do? You like to play games. So play games and save money was kind of a cool thing. And that's kind of what we did.
Totally.
That was just for fun. But if you look at my first internet business, so in 93, I got my first PC and internet was around. And I learned about it. So I bought a PC so I can get on the internet. And I was enthralled that, wow, they've taken this ARPANET system and really vamped it up. So now it's like always on internet.
Instant, yeah.
And so I remember my first exercise on the internet was I logged into a computer. I logged into my ISP because back then you would just do a dial-up by modem for some people who don't know what that is, right?
Yeah.
You dial up by modem, you connect to a server, and then you would log in all command line from that server to another server. You'd have to know the location. At the time, it was the IP address and the username password to get into that server. And then that server would get you to another server. And then that server got me to the final destination server I was looking for, which was an archive in Japan that had a bunch of the Hubble telescope pictures. And then you would go down the list and it would give you a description of each picture. Because again, the internet was very slow in the beginning. So you couldn't look at the picture. So I'd say, okay, I want to look at this picture, and this picture.
So you were picking and choosing.
Right. It would then load it through all that long connection down to your ISP. Then you'd log off, get back to your ISP and say, okay, download my queue. So you'd have a queue of all the downloadable files. It would start the download process and say, okay, 28 minutes to complete 3 pictures downloaded, right?
Yeah.
You go off and have lunch, come back, and then you look at the picture and be like, wow. And that was like
how
the
spoiled
start.
We are today.
So when that happened, I was like, man, this is awesome. This is going to change the world. I'm going to see all traffic going to this as they make this faster, smarter, more computers connected to it. So I started an internet magazine in 93.
Okay.
And I'm not a writer, but I just wanted to write about the new things that I was learning because there really wasn't a medium for that.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a blog in essence, or? Or it was really like just an online magazine?
It was a newsletter that I would email out to people. So
Okay.
traditional newsletter, nothing earth shattering.
And how did
But
you, just curious, how did you generate your emails? Who are you sending it to?
I trolled AOL news groups back in the day.
Okay.
And, a lot of these news groups would have hundreds of people involved in the room. And I would say, hey, I have a newsletter that's out. It's free.
Hmm.
Just need your email address. If you want to if you want to be subscribed to the newsletter.
Yeah.
And in like 6 months, I had like 20,000 people opted into the newsletter.
That's unbelievable.
So,
I
and
mean,
then,
tactics that we use today still, you know?
yeah, it was
Yeah.
great. And then somebody turned around and had the bright idea because once a week I'm writing the article, getting on my 14.4 modem, sending out the mail to 20,000 people, which took hours.
Yeah.
And it was just I loved the process. I was having fun, make no money. And then somebody asked me, can they advertise in the newsletter?
Yeah.
And I'm not thinking, why not?
Yeah.
And that's when we started making money off the newsletter.
Yeah.
And by the time I shut the newsletter down, we had over 150,000 people subscribed to the newsletter for 93, 94. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And were these guys making any sales off of their
Oh, yeah.
advertisements within your newsletter?
My number one vendor was a vacuum bag company.
Okay.
So, like, buying vacuum
Repeat
bags.
purchase.
Yeah. He would sell them online. He would give
Yeah.
discounts. He would mail it, ship it right to your door. And he loved it. He was
Yeah.
making so much money doing it. And he was our number one advertiser in the newsletter.
That's so interesting. Of course, as a marketer, I'm like wanting to dig in further and say, well, who was your audience? Was it the female audiences that were buying it, or was it the male, and so on and so forth?
I didn't care.
Yeah.
I don't honestly know who the audience was because we didn't have any analytics
Any
back then.
data.
We
Exactly.
had an email address. That's all we
Yeah.
collected
And that's
was an
all it
email
was.
address.
And everybody
And
had funny email addresses back then. It was never their first or last name. It was like kittycat79 or something strange.
you can never figure out who they were most of the time by
No.
their email
Yeah,
address.
totally. So cool. Very interesting. Okay. And then next after this, I'm going through the motions.
So yeah, so what ended up happening is in
I'm,
'94 the web browser came out. My
yep.
first version was Netscape Alpha version 0.93.
Okay. Okay.
So this was early on, and it was a Netscape version. And I thought this was really cool. And again, one of my newsletter subscribers said, "Hey, why don't you start up a web mall?" I'd buy a store, and it was the vacuum cleaner guy,
Yeah.
vacuum bag cleaner guy. So I said, "Okay." So I sent an email out to the distribution. I said, "Okay, I'm going to set up a web mall. I will design a store for you, give you 3 pages, a contact us page where they can submit, information, phone number, logo. I'll design the whole thing. I'll charge $150 for like 3 months of service.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's, and design work is free if you pay for the package. And then it's $150 a quarter. And if you're interested, send me it because back then we could take check by fax.
Yeah.
So they would fax you a check and then you'd be able to take the check information, put it into your computer, print it as long as you have the right ink cartridge in there,
Yeah.
and take it to the bank and cash it without a signature. It was kind of weird, but that's what we did. And I want to say,
Definitely not something that banks would want to be doing right now.
no, I think they outlawed that.
I mean, you print like
I
20 checks.
want to say I got like 60 or 70 checks inside of 3 days.
Wow.
So my mother-in-law looked at me and I remember her saying, she's like, "You can't take the money. You don't know what you're doing." I go, "Yeah, but for like whatever it was, 10 grand, I'll figure it out."
Yeah.
So I took a week off from work and I basically read 2,000 pages worth of programming guides from graphic design to HTML and all the basic building blocks of the sites. Built all the sites. Took me 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And launched it was called the First Street Mall because back then SEO was simple.
Yes.
It was all alphabetized. So 1stmall.com was our web address, so we would show up first on the list, or at least towards the top.
Yeah.
And that launched my first venture into web design and web hosting, which we had some issues with our web hosting company. So I decided, why not just build it in my house? So I had a T1 brought into my house back then, 300 phone lines, and I figured let's start up an ISP at the same time.
Okay.
And when we did, we were on US Robotics 56K modem technology, which was the fastest connection out at the time. And we were one of the first companies to get their modems because our serial number was actually 8 on the first box that arrived.
Okay.
So we got written
as
up
in like the eighth one.
8th model,
Okay.
8th unit they rolled off the floor.
Yeah.
And I want to say we got written up in a magazine for having the fastest internet on the East Coast for like 6 months. because all the other companies, they already invested in their hardware. They didn't want to revamp their hardware just for the next technology.
Yeah.
So for at least a 6-month gap, we had the fastest internet on the East Coast, which was kind of cool.
That is very cool. And this was all from the build out of the mall, correct? And everybody
Yeah.
that was advertising with you. That's pretty awesome. What
Yeah.
magazine
So
was it?
I called it Internet Exchange. I
Okay.
actually found a copy in one of the archives on the internet. So I posted it on my LinkedIn.
Yeah.
One of the old copies of the
Yeah,
articles
yeah.
I wrote. It was kind of cool.
I love it. Going back into the archives and
Yeah.
history.
And
Okay.
then the cable modem came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, everybody's with us because we're fast. And cable modems are really fast.
Yeah.
We got to get out. So I sold the company. Not a lot of money, but it was like 6 figures. It was a nice acquisition. We got rid of it, got out of it just so we didn't lose the business over time.
Yep.
Um, and I puddled around with a couple other interesting business models, nothing crazy. And then I had an idea to start, this was interesting, a bidded search engine. It
Okay.
didn't exist.
No.
So I built a business model, put a business playbook together. I had what they call a hypothetical business appraisal on the company. So they give you an appraisal of the company just on the idea. I got a $10 million valuation on that. Then I ran out trying to
Okay.
raise funding for it so I can
Okay.
get it off the ground because I needed
And this was a
probably
bidding model to bid on
ads.
ads. Okay. So this was the first, what we call today,
Google.
the Google. Yes, exactly. Or it's like what other agencies are calling ad exchange for other marketers that are on the
Yep.
call. Yeah.
So this was the first. So I had this great idea to do this, and
Mm-hmm.
while I was trying to shop it around for money, somebody said somebody did your idea, and they showed me the prospectus for Google. I'm like,
Yeah.
damn it! And they already had the funding behind them.
Yeah.
So one of my
So close.
I was bringing on as a partner says, well, why don't we do one of the other aspects of it?
Yeah.
Um, so we launched a company in December of '99 called paidforsurf.com. I don't know if you guys remember, but there used to be these applications. All Advantage was like the number one player. We were the number 3 player in the space where you download an application and it would flip through ads and you would get paid each hour you had those ads running.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. I'm doing fraud detection today, right? That's the business model today.
Yeah.
But back then, we had people trying to defraud the system, like college kids who would try to have something running in the system or some automated system. So it made it look like they were in front of their computer. So while they're at class, they're making
They
money.
could get paid. Yeah.
And so we had to have anti-fraud built into the software, and I had to figure out how to do all that. But we had some members getting paid thousands of dollars a month to surf the web, and it was a great business model. We actually
Yeah.
had it 3 months after launching it. It was doing so much money in business.
So kind of like
Um,
the idea of like the beginnings of an affiliate, but not necessarily an
no, it
affiliate.
wasn't
No,
because
it
every
was just
user we
basically
had,
surfing the net.
every user we
Yeah.
had was a direct consumer.
Yeah.
In fact, I saw the statistic and I thought it was kind of interesting. It took Netflix, I think it was 18 months to get their first 1 million subscribers. We had
Interesting.
our first 1 million subscribers in 11 months.
Yeah.
Now, granted, they were getting paid every user for their services, but it was
Yeah.
just kind of neat that it grew that fast. And we had it sold. I always tell people, so we launched in December of '99, March of 2000. So 3 months later, we had a buyer on the table already for the product, for the company for 60 million for a 3-month-old company. Even back
Wow.
then, that was
Yeah.
pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So we had everything wrapped up and ready to roll, and everyone was signing paperwork in April 28th of 2000.
Yeah.
And April 15th or April 14th, the dot-com bubble burst. So the deal came off the table.
Yeah.
Then I launched another company, company called blowsearch.com. It was a bidded search engine, but it was done a little bit differently at the time. But because we had a lot of these little ad networks that were popping up that were doing these, or kind of modeling after Google.
Yeah.
I had that sold, shook hands with the buyer. Turns out there was 4 of us in the company. 2 of them were brothers. They were fighting about everything, and they scared away the buyer of the bank.
Yeah.
So
Oh my
that went
gosh.
away.
Yeah.
Then my
So
wife and
many
I
so
said,
close touches.
yeah.
Yeah.
So then my wife said, you know what? Let's start a business together, just you and me. Like, you've got
Yeah.
all this experience, let's put something together. So we put together a company called Ezanga, launched that in September, I'm sorry, 2020, 2003, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. And your wife's background is also in digital or marketing, or has nothing to do with that. Okay.
Nursing.
Business brains.
Nursing.
Okay. Fantastic.
But,
Yeah.
she started off by keeping the books.
Okay.
And then every time as the company started to grow, and I would do all the programming and all that stuff in the sales.
Yeah.
And then as things started growing, she would start taking on different roles, like the marketing role, the operations role, um, and start, she just, wherever she needed to be filled in, she would run out, take a course from college
Amazing.
and say, okay, let's get this figured out. And we just
Yeah.
started the company together. So that was 2003. 2004, after we launched it, we had some issues with the traffic. We had a couple clients questioning some of the traffic, and I started looking at it and realized, oh, wow, this is fraud.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I said, you know what? I don't want to be the guy solving fraud, which is funny because today that's what I do.
Yeah.
Um, let's go find a company that does this. Let's bolt it onto our platform and then just focus on our business. This way
Yeah.
we can.
And when you say like the traffic was fraud, was it just was it what we know of as bots today, or was it just fake traffic? Or define that what you
Yeah.
mean by like fraud back then?
Back then it was just straight bots. That
Okay.
was that was the easy way. They also had click farms,
Yes.
later on, but it
Yep.
was basically bots. So in other words, Ezanga had an affiliate program. Affiliates can sign up and drive traffic to our network. And if they generated clicks on the ads, they would get paid, so many cents per click.
Yep.
So a big incentive for an affiliate to fraud the system. And they started using bots to drive those fake clicks. And that's how they made their money. And of course, it upset our clients. So we had
Yep.
to address that problem. So I looked in 2004 and 2005 and couldn't find a single company out in the marketplace that did fraud detection. In fact, the first commercially available one didn't come out until like 2008.
Okay.
So as a developer, I figured I'd write it myself. So I wrote the code myself and it worked great. And I kept iterating it because fraud keeps changing.
Yep.
And 10 years later, I'm starting to have all these clients asking to license our technology outside of our platform because it was working better than traffic they were getting from any other network.
Yeah.
So we did some testing, realized we did have a better platform. It was more accurate. It was finding more fraud. It was just such a different way of looking at data compared to every other company out in the marketplace. So we did some testing, decided to launch it. We actually did in 2015. We called it a year-long study in ad fraud, where we bought traffic. We spent 6 figures of our own money to drive traffic to our site and had 4 different companies judge the traffic. So us, our technology that we had built, and then 3 other technology companies. And then we had performance benchmarks that we were able to look at and human verify and realize that we were more accurate in finding more fraud. So we knew we had something special.
Yeah.
So put together some beta testing, got some feedback from some clients early on, built a platform to run the whole thing. And then April 1st of 2017, we launched Anura as a standalone product.
Very, 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 very
So
cool. I mean, such an interesting journey, and this is why I like to take a step back to kind of showcase how the buildup, and especially in your case, kind of happens. That it's not necessarily that everything kind of touched within each other because they're a hairline separation, but it is a nice sort of piecemeal up into an Anura. So let's talk about Anura.
sure.
Tell us a little bit about, the beginnings of, and, what was the gap in the market in this case for you to build Anura, and what was the differentiation factor?
Yeah. So a lot of the companies back early on, so let's say prior to 2017, so the ones that launched in like 2008, 9, 10 era were mostly focused on programmatic advertising,
Yep.
right? And what's the benchmark for programmatic advertising? There isn't any,
Yes.
right? Because it's all branding and it's sold for branding. It's put eyeballs in front of it. So it was kind of ingenious. One of the original fraud detection companies came up with this term called viewability.
Mm-hmm.
And they got together with the IAB and some other companies, and they tried to come up with a definition for viewability so that everyone says, hey, it's based on somebody viewing my ad, which is what I want. And the best definition they can come up with, it's still today the definition is at minimum 50% of your ad must be in a viewable portion of the browser for no less than 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
So half your ad for 1 second is considered a viewable impression.
Yeah.
Now, I did this with a major Fortune 100 company. I took half an ad and I sent it to them and I said, I want you to look at this for 1 second and then close the email and tell me, because we had Zoom back then,
Yep.
and tell me what brand it is. So I sent him half the ad. He looked at it. He goes, Rich, I'm still looking at it. I don't know who it is. Let me send you the rest of the ad. So I send the ad. It was his ad.
Okay.
And he's like, I don't get it. So I said, well, you're paying for viewability is for half the ad to be in view. But interestingly enough, this was supposed to be a fraud metric. Not a single word in that entire description of what viewability is says fraud.
Yeah.
Or to whom those ads are supposed to be shown to. Because according to the definition, a bot can see that ad as long as it looks viewable.
Yeah.
It counts as a viewable impression. And I think that's the main reason why today programmatic advertising has an average, based on our stats, of 50% fraudulent traffic.
50%. That's a pretty high number still today.
And it's I just tested somebody who was testing. I won't name the DSP, but they were just testing a major DSP, publicly traded DSP.
Yeah.
And came back at 48% fraud.
And what is the plan to continue to bring that percentage down, to mitigate that? I mean, because it's kind of like this double-edged sword of, as you plan and as you learn more about the systems and you bring that number down, then it keeps learning to like kind of stay in the same path that it's in, correct?
Well, here's what's interesting. I have a slide deck that I put together some time ago, and I got to dig it up again. But starting around 2014, they started tracking the amount of fraud based on some metric.
Yeah.
And it hovered around $6 or $7 billion, which is a big number.
Yeah.
Per year. And then I want to say it was about 2018 or 19, it spiked.
Yeah.
And it's been spiking year after year. So it went from 7 or 8 billion to 19 billion to 40 billion to 80 billion to last year, it was estimated to be $125 billion. Part of the reason for that is these solutions that sell on viewability are pretty big brands. So now what happens is I go to the DSP and sell you my brand, so you have my brand of protection, and I sell that same protection to the advertiser. So the advertiser and the brand think the traffic is clean. Meanwhile, it's being beat because there's no performance metrics behind it.
Yeah.
And every time I bring somebody in, I show it to them. So like they say, well, show me proof. So great. So we run through, I find a site that's got 100% fraud. And there's lots of them, like tons to choose from.
Yeah.
And I bring up that site and I show them the page that their ad's supposed to be showing on.
And it's not.
And their jaw drops. And they're like, you got to be kidding me. I said, you're paying for that.
And it's not even getting the impression.
Nope. It's false serving the impression. And you're paying for that false serving. So imagine our goal is to work with our clients, depending on the channel that they're in.
Yeah.
Reduce or eliminate that fake traffic or that fake audience. Take that money, stick it into the audience that performs, which generates conversion.
Yeah.
And you'll feel the difference on your bottom line.
Oh, for sure. Okay, so I just want to dig in a little bit more. So we obviously understood the history of where these bots were coming from, but today, walk us through a little bit about, who's controlling this in essence, like who's controlling the fake traffic that's occurring right now on these sites. Where is that coming from? Just to dissect it for the listeners a little bit further.
If I had to give you a single point, I would say organized crime around the globe.
Okay. And they are doing this why?
Money.
Okay.
125 billion last year.
That's so they get paid for that.
Sure.
To block traffic. In
no,
essence?
send traffic. To send
traffic.
Okay,
to send traffic.
Yeah.
Okay. So they just to further even dissect it, right? Because it can be a little bit of a web here. No pun intended. But it's really the concept of they're making money off of what you are spending on the ad exchange because you're thinking that your ad is getting viewership when it's not. So they're collecting, cents on X dollars. And it's growing. So obviously, hence what did you say? 1.2,
125 billion.
125 billion.
Which represents 21% of the overall digital marketing spend globally.
I want to know what country is gaining on this the most.
The problem with that is pinpointing that is very difficult because of all the privacy laws that we have put together because for whatever reason, we're trying to protect everybody's privacy. Like you walk into a store, they got a camera in your face.
Yeah.
They know who you are, what items you picked up. They know everything about you.
Yeah. On
the internet, everything's trackable. And it's like, wait a second, I want my privacy.
Yeah.
So because you want your privacy, I should say not you, but we all, the whole society want privacy.
Yeah.
As a fraudster, I can hide myself. And because of privacy rules, you can't tell who I am.
Yeah. So then when you work with, so who's your ideal sort of customer? You don't work with the brands themselves, or you do, or you work with, or you work with agencies that are running these ads for these clients?
Both.
Okay.
But my ideal client profile that I go after typically is the brand,
Yeah.
because the agency, half the agencies I hear from, it's like, well, we get paid on volume and my client's not complaining, so I'm not going to do anything about it.
Yeah. And so I like, from a percentage standpoint, Rich, I don't think a lot of the agencies even they may know about this, and to your point, they're not doing anything because they're either collecting a percentage, or they're really collecting a percentage for the most part on how much the client is spending. And if somebody's spending millions, then that's a good chunk of money for them,
Yep.
right? So I don't think, personally, I don't think a lot of agencies, just as a marketer having worked with third-party agencies, this has ever come up in my 21
Nope.
years of career.
They don't want to talk about it because it's money off. They believe it's money off their table.
Yeah.
However, I do work with some very large ad agencies
Yeah.
that understand if they improve the quality of traffic,
Then it's more money for them.
their
Yeah.
clients are going to grow, spend more money with them. So they know it's a long-term play. And besides, there's so much traffic out there.
Yeah.
When we come in and say, let's block this traffic, another source picks it up. It's not lost.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we don't hurt volume,
Yeah.
because volume is the name of the game. That's how everybody gets paid.
Yeah. But this isn't a one and done block for you, because this is kind of like, if you take on a client, this is a daily management.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's face it. Today, we're rolling out another update to
Yeah.
our algorithms.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
rolling out updates probably twice a week to our algorithms,
Yeah.
because fraud's ever evolving. Nobody wants us to interfere with that $125 billion loss,
Yeah.
right? Except for the brand. So normally we focus on going after brands because they don't want to spend a penny on it. So, for
Yeah.
example, our typical pitch to a client is, okay, you're spending $1 million a month in digital marketing. Depending on the channel that you're advertising or whatever, the average across the board when we scan a new client is 25%.
Yeah.
That means right now, regardless if we do business together or not, you're already spending or giving $250,000 a month to fraudsters.
Yeah.
You're funding organized crime.
Yeah.
Now, I can solve that for a couple of bucks if you're interested,
Yeah.
and I can prove it by giving you a free trial and showing you how it works. But whether we work together or not, you're still spending. You're already paying for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's another question for you from an analytics standpoint, because Facebook obviously knows this is happening.
Yep.
And I don't know if they're necessarily, doing anything about it, because a lot of the times when small businesses should just never be marketing on Facebook, because if you're spending X amount of money, if you're telling me 49 to 50% is fraud, no wonder these ads are never getting any kind of traction here. And then it's like
that's again
yeah,
programmatic.
yeah,
Facebook has a lower rate.
has a lower
5
rate.
to 10%.
Okay, okay. Okay, so programmatic is 49 to 50%. So then social channels are 10 to 15%.
Let me think. There are some channels that are a little bit higher.
Okay.
But
so then
let's call it
Google
10
is what? Let's say like, Google ads. Is that
about
also
10%.
like about 10%?
Well,
Yeah.
it depends. If you're buying Google
Yeah.
search, it's about 10%. If you buy Google Display Network, which again is a display network, it's 50%.
Yeah.
If you're buying YouTube, it's 25%. Each
Yeah.
channel is a little different percentage.
Yeah. So then I'm wondering, just based on looking at analytics from these platforms like Google and Facebook, and then looking at your Google analytics, there's a lot of discrepancy. Or when you're looking at Facebook, is this because of the bots at times?
It can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I had a client that's like, I'm spending I was just talking to somebody, actually, not a client. He's like, I'm spending $35,000, and he's like, and I'm seeing nothing at times. Right. And he's like, nobody can figure this out. Nobody can figure this out. But I mean, if one major aspect is the malware and the bots and the fraud, then this is something that people need to know more about this. Or to your point, they're just not, they know it, but they're just kind of turning a blind eye.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I do these podcasts. I do them on a regular basis to try to get awareness out there that, hey, there's a problem out in the marketplace.
Yeah.
There is a solution. And the nice thing, with a company like us, we give you a free trial so you can find out exactly, is the problem fraudulent related?
Yeah.
So we come up and we scan you and you don't have fraud. Well, you'd be the first, but
everybody has fraud, right?
Everybody has fraud, right? It just comes down to how much fraud do they have, and does it make financial sense to work with us?
Yeah.
Because like I said, if it's a very, very small amount of fraud, it might be easier just to pay the fraud than to pay us. We're not that expensive, but It depends on how much you're spending, what the percentage
Yeah.
of fraud is. So if you're spending $10,000 a month and you are finding 5% fraud, it's $500 a month. Probably not worth it to work together.
Yeah.
But you're spending $100,000 a month, we're finding 25% fraud, 25,000. Yeah, for a couple bucks we can solve that.
Yeah.
But here's what's kind of interesting when you look at programmatic. This gets a little bit deep into the woods, so I'll try to keep it high level as best I can.
Yeah. Yeah.
You go to a company that's buying on a DSP, and it doesn't matter what DSP they're buying on. 9 times out of 10, a DSP is using a fraud solution, a certified fraud solution.
They are using a fraud solution.
Right.
Why?
To protect against fraud.
Okay.
But let me give you a little understanding under the hood of fraud.
Yeah.
So when IAB and the 4As got together and created this standard for fraud detection companies, that this is like a minimum standard you should follow.
Yeah.
And just to give you an example, there's probably 70 plus companies in the marketplace that do some type of fraud detection. There's only 7 of us that are certified to follow the basic industry standards.
To block it.
Right. So if you're looking for a fraud solution and you don't use us, make sure you at least pick one that is either MRC accredited or tag certified against fraud.
Mm-hmm.
At least you know they're following the basic minimum standards. Anyway, so the reason why certification is important is because it's how it's classified. So it's not called fraud. It's called IVT, invalid traffic. Most people have heard of the term. What they don't realize is under that umbrella, there's 2 classifications. You have GIVT, which is general invalid traffic. Those are your basic bots and data center attacks, right? And then you have your sophisticated invalid traffic, SIVT.
Yeah.
That's advanced bots, AI bots, malware, human fraud. Those are the really advanced things that are happening.
Mm-hmm. And those are 2 categories.
2 different categories.
Okay.
So what happens is when you go to a DSP...
But that's all there is. There isn't any more than those, right?
No,
those
just
are the
those
2 buckets. Yep. Okay.
Just the 2 buckets.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. When you go to a DSP and they say, oh, we already have fill in the blank, some name of some company that's doing our fraud detection, what they're not telling you, it's a GIVT filter, right? It's a pre-bid solution that picks up the IP address and user agent, tries to make a decision, and typically picks up 1 to 3% fraud. What they're missing is the sophisticated fraud that makes it to your ad. And there you need a sophisticated invalid traffic filter to identify that. That's why when people like you might go to an agency and they call up their DSP and say, hey, what do you guys do for fraud detection? Oh, we use such and such a company and they're MRC accredited and they're like top ranked and blah. What they're not telling you is the solution that they're using to solve the fraud.
Yeah.
Because a GIVT filter in today's day and age, it's okay, but it's not the solution to programmatic at all.
Yeah. So interesting. And how many of these companies are out there? Because, as you're mentioning, there's only really seven of them that are credible, that can really support what you're saying, can block.
They're popping up every day because it's a SaaS business model, and SaaS in the marketplace is always sexy because it's supposed to have a lower cost. It's supposed to have a higher profit margin. So everybody's like, oh, I want to do SaaS. And let's face it. I mean, I'm a developer, or used to be, I should say, right back in the day.
Yeah.
I haven't wrote code probably in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
But I know enough as a developer. I can literally build a product that does fraud detection probably in a week. Then get somebody to put together some type of website, get us, somebody to head up sales, start selling the product, come into the market with some differentiator and sell.
Yeah.
And start selling. And it's not going to be a good one.
Yeah.
But what I can build in a week is going to be very basic.
Yeah.
But it's enough to get into the market and make people think you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then you're spending ad dollars and then you're spending money on what you think is fraud protection. And so you're just spending and spending on spending.
And here's the thing. I tell people this all the time. Like, we live in a society where when you buy a piece of software, you expect it to do what it's designed to do.
Yeah.
For example, almost every one of us uses Excel in our day-to-day lives, right? You jump into it, you build out these fancy Excel spreadsheets, you put in all the formulas, you put in information, it calculates a number, and then you make a business decision based on that number. When was the last time you went back and checked to make sure Excel was doing the calculations right? You don't, because we live in a society where we expect software to do that.
Yeah.
In my space, I have found and caught most of my competitors not doing it right. They have what's called a false positive rate, which is 15% on average. I've caught some with as much as 50% false positives through client testimonials.
Yeah.
And what's happening is they're mismarking real people as fraud and mismarking fraud as real people. So at the end of the day, it's really hurting your business. It's not helping your business.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is you'll have some of these companies that will, I don't know what they're doing, but they're over blocking. So what ends up happening is perfect. Here's an example of over blocking. One of my content writers, and I wish I knew the name of the site. Maybe I probably shouldn't say the name of the site, but she was buying some fashion stuff from a website that she
Okay.
visited all the time. And she logged into the site. She did her shopping, put it into the shopping bag, went to check out. It wouldn't let her check out.
Hmm.
I thought she was a bot.
Oh, so like every time she put in her credit card, it would just like refresh and say, or
It
would
would
it
tell
say
her.
her
It would tell
credit
her.
card wasn't accepted?
Yeah, it gave her an error code, and she knew
Okay.
based
That's
on writing
happened
to
to me,
us.
by the way, multiple times.
That's called a false positive, right?
Okay.
So what does that? What did that do for her? For her, she got frustrated. She tried a different machine at the same location, so it was probably an IP blocking solution.
Yeah.
Blocked the IP she was coming from. She got so frustrated, she went to the competitor, bought the product with no problem, and now
Okay.
she only spends money on the competitor, so she don't have a problem. So what did that
Interesting.
false positive cost that business?
Yeah, totally.
So I always tell people when you buy a solution that you're going to trust to manage your marketing budget and your buyer's journey, make sure you thoroughly test it and make sure you look at the data and validate it before you trust it to be your visitor firewall.
Yeah. Wow, that's really incredible because I have experienced that, on major e-commerce sites, like not just a small mom and pop site, on a major e-commerce site. So let's take a little bit of a turn here with regards to AI. Let's talk a little bit about how AI is helping you guys to improve, but then also how AI could also be supercharging and developing more fraud, more bots, more malware, and so on and so forth.
So we're all familiar with ChatGPT. That's what
Yeah,
made AI famous, right? If AI has been out for decades,
sure.
but that's made it famous because it puts it into the user's hands. Hey,
Yeah.
write me a book on this, or tell me what this paragraph in this contract actually means. Like
Yeah.
it gives you real use case of
Day
that
to
type of
day use.
technology.
Yeah.
But you can go on the dark web right now and download something called Fraud GPT,
Yeah.
which will actually write you bots to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So AI is helping fraudsters commit more fraud by advancing their bot technology, making it look more human, and all kinds of interesting things.
Mm-hmm.
We have tested AI, and I know every company wants to say, we're using AI. Eh, AI is like a child, right? You try to teach it certain things, and it's going to go off and do its own thing and try to learn and become its own unique individual. Same with AI. It's trying
Yeah.
to be its own individual. We like machine learning. That's just what we prefer. We've been using it for 20, almost it's coming up 20 years now. Next year will be 20 years.
Yeah.
We've been building it on a very early version of machine learning that we've liked and trust. And it does a far superior position for us in fraud detection. We keep testing AI until it's ready for what we want it to do. Because we don't trust the computer to do a lot on its own. Like we have self-learning algorithms inside the system that automatically updating themselves in real time and protecting people. So if a new threat comes out in a few, it could be at 2 a.m. when the rest
Mm-hmm.
all of us are sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
our systems are on top of it and know how to affect and block it.
Yep.
But it's under our guidelines. It's what we told it to do. It's not off on its own like AI likes to do and decide how it wants to handle it.
Yeah.
Because then you create false positives. And false positives, we already said, are no good for your business.
Hmm.
So one of the things you mentioned, you asked one thing too, is what's one of the differentiators for us? And this is what we've come up with is based on client feedback. We're
Mm-hmm.
99.999% accurate when identifying fraud.
Okay.
In fact, we're in the process right now of rolling out a guarantee
Mm-hmm.
to back that up because we saw a couple of competitors start posting, oh, we're 99% accurate. We're 99.9%
Yeah.
accurate. And I've gotten multiple clients come back and
From
say
them.
they're wildly inaccurate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So again, if they put it on their website, people believe it.
Yeah. For
So we're
sure.
going to guarantee it. So we're that confident with our product that we're going to
Yeah.
put a guarantee behind it so that if we're wrong, you can call us out and we'll give you credit.
Yeah. So we did talk a little bit about some websites having a little bit of fraud, not enough to maybe potentially work with you, or it's just, pay the fraud and kind of like move on. But how low is too low? Like, how do you measure that is what I'm saying. Like you,
It's a
like,
financial number, right?
okay.
So let's say if we're identifying $500 in fraud,
Yeah.
and we're not $500 a month. We're a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
We tend to handle mid market and above.
Yeah.
But even if I charged you $500, would it be worth running the process to break even? And some clients say yes, and most clients will say no. They want to see an ROI when they invest in a product
Yeah.
like ours.
Yeah.
But every time you invest in a product for your business, you want to see some type of ROI. And that doesn't matter if it's saving you an hour here, it's making your life a little easier, it's doing something. There's ROI there. It may not be dollars and cents.
Yeah.
There's some tangible ROI behind it. So for us, it becomes a client situation. Like if I find $10,000 a month in fraud and it's going to cost me $2,000 a month to save that for the client, that's a good ROI.
Yeah.
And I'd be happy with it. Most of our clients see well above that. So like I said, an example where clients spending $1 million a month in digital marketing and they're seeing $250,000 loss. I mean, if I charge them a couple $1,000, it's a big win for them.
Yeah.
So that's why we focus on that mid-sized company and up, because the ROI factor is
Makes a
big there. Not that
difference.
we don't work with smaller companies.
Yeah.
We have a way of working with them too, but we try to. It all comes down, if we're going to work together, is really at the end of the day,
Yeah.
what's the ROI for them? Is it a financial sense to work together?
Yeah. Another question from setup. So when you bring on a client and you set this up, is it from the back end of the website? Is it directly working with the agency? Like how does the process work?
Oh, good question. So typically, we deal with the head of marketing, so like the
Okay.
CMO, the director of digital marketing, typically a marketing person,
Yep.
not a technical person,
Yep.
right?
Okay. Interesting.
So 9 times out of 10, if we had to go to their developers, now we got to get involved in sprints, and now we got to resell to some
Yeah.
CTO who says I can probably solve the problem myself, which they can't,
Yeah.
and it becomes a big hassle. So what
Yeah.
we did was we got pre-built into Google Tag Manager. So now, if a client comes to us and says, "Hey, I want to use you guys," we can literally walk them through it on the phone, and inside of 2 or 3 minutes, deploy it through Google Tag Manager if they're using Google Tag Manager,
That is this
which is
most straightforward thing that I have ever heard as it relates to like digital marketing and setting up things from the back end. Because a lot of the times, and that's why I was like, oh, interesting, you're going to connect with the marketer. How so? Don't you need a tech person involved? Doesn't the back end engineer of the website need to come in and set it up? But wow, okay.
yeah, we make it easy, right?
Yeah.
Because the goal is we want to make it easy to get it integrated
Yeah.
so that more people will use it. Because I can't tell you how many large companies I come in contact with, and it's like, okay, we just went through a month long, trial evaluation, and they just signed off on it. Now they have to get it into the team, and now they got to find out which sprint it's going to fit into, where on the roadmap. And now you're talking 2, 3 months down the road, and
Yeah.
it's like, and then 2, 3 months down the road, it's like, well, budgets have changed. Like it becomes hard to sell into a client
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So we try to make it as easy as possible. And we figured Google Tag Managers probably runs 75% of the websites out in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And if not, we give a simple tag that they can just deploy on the website, which is generally fairly simple. Like in our company, we're not a huge company. We're about 25, 30 people.
Yeah.
And I have a developer team that's all they focus on is product and product knowledge and fixing all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I have a dedicated marketing resource that does the web. The web is the webmaster for the company. So they're two separate divisions, and that
Hmm.
tends to be like that a lot in a lot of cases. It's not handled by the heavy techs; it's handled
Got
by
it.
the marketing tech,
Yep.
which has got more resources. So deploying a tag is pretty simple, but we figured, hey, Google Tag Manager gets us in the door 75% of the time.
Yeah.
You walk in, check a couple of boxes, put in your instance ID, boop, and you're live.
Yeah. Okay. Um, Another question as it relates to, you know, some of the ads that are running, for example, okay, stem cell or like things that Google may find speculative and like that kind of stuff. Is that being picked up by bots? Because you know, I had a client, for example, that was in the health industry or the medical industry, and they had, Regenex, stem cell, those type of things that were on their website, and Google kept coming back and saying, it's speculative, we cannot approve these ads, so on and so forth. So it's really like changing the names. Is there a way around it with using your technology, and is it just bots based on these platforms that are immediately coming in to either block it or to do you know where I'm going with this question?
Yeah. So
Hmm.
here's the thing: when Google's validating ads,
Yeah.
they want to see the landing page, and they're trying to do right by their user.
Yeah.
Face it, Google's job is to connect people with information.
Yeah.
That's their mantra. That's what they're trying to accomplish. So, and they're also trying to do things right to prevent people from getting misled
Yeah.
as much as possible.
Yeah.
Like, how many times have you gone on Facebook, for example, and seen, wow, this great new weight loss product has been endorsed by the Shark Tank?
Yeah.
And it's not been endorsed by Shark Tank,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's bad for a consumer. And if Facebook could figure out how to get those ads off the system, it would be a good thing. So Google's trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So if the ad is kind of on something that's controversial and it's against Google's policy, our technology can tell that Google's bot is coming to search the site, and we could block it.
Yeah.
The problem is, if we block it, they're going to deny the ad
And it's a
anyway
ripple
because they can't
effect.
visit the site.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, I mean, that's how it works. Really, what we are is the best way to describe what our technology is all about is a visitor firewall,
Yes. Okay.
right? So if we identify that a visitor is coming to your site that's not real, for example, let's say I get somebody coming, I'm like, nope, this is a fraudulent visitor.
Yeah.
And you have an e-commerce website. Do you want to take their credit card? No. Because what's going to happen is most credit card chargebacks takes months to come through.
Mm-hmm.
And affiliate programs get paid out net 7, net 15, they get paid really quick.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's too late. The product's already been shipped before they know that it's been a chargeback.
Yep.
So there's a lot of hard costs out for an e-commerce company. So e-commerce fraud is really important to make sure you get it right and you don't block people by mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the last thing you want to do is have a bad buyer's journey. Because if, like you
And
said, you went
blocks,
to a
yeah.
site and you try to make a purchase, you can't.
Yeah.
If that name ever comes up in conversation with your friends, you're going to tell them, I had a bad experience.
Mm-hmm.
And you're
So
happy to tell them about
do
it.
you work with credit card processing companies?
Not with the credit card processing companies, but the e-commerce
The
companies
e-commerce
themselves.
backend. Okay.
Because they're the ones who care most about it.
Yeah.
Usually we get a call from them directly. Like, we do a lot of content marketing, and we'll get a call from them. It's like, oh my God, I'm worried. My chargeback ratio is starting to climb to a point I'm worried about losing my merchant account.
Yeah.
Can you help us? Yes, we can. Because
Okay.
most of those chargebacks are coming from,
Yeah.
and then, once we put our code on the page, we realize it's fraud. So
Yeah.
we have, human fraud firms armed with credit cards making purchases so that the affiliate can get paid a commission of the product.
Yeah.
And when it gets charged back, doesn't matter. Affiliate already got paid.
Yeah. That's true. Craziest case study you've ever had?
Craziest case study.
Or the one that didn't seem like it was going to get solved, or, it did get solved, or,
I've got an interesting one.
okay.
I'll leave the name of the company blank,
Yeah, for sure.
but they came to us, and it's a publicly traded company. And I talked about, hey, on average, we find 25% fraud, blah, blah, blah. And they came to us and said, we'd love to work with you, but if I turn your code on and block 25% of my revenue, my stock is going to tank. It's going to hurt the company. It could really put us in bad shape. Like,
Yeah.
we can't afford a 25% hit in traffic.
Yeah.
So, and this was the first time it came across like, oh, this is the first publicly traded company that I've worked with
But it's a
before.
hidden traffic that they're not making money on, though.
But they were buying and selling the traffic. So they were getting paid on it both ways.
Okay, so this is it. This is an interesting case study.
This is where it gets interesting, because
Okay.
so I came up with this story that I tell these companies, like, look,
Yeah.
I get you eat based on your volume, and
Yeah.
we want to keep that volume the same. So we've come up with a game plan with this company. This is how we started it, of let's look at the traffic first. Let's identify where the bad traffic is and get rid of it. And let's look at the good traffic and get more of it,
Yeah.
so that we can keep your volume at the same. So you're not hurting your revenue streams, but you're increasing the quality of your product. And we talked about it, and we did it on one of their arms. And I said, let's give it 3 months.
Yeah.
It's a big company, a lot of traffic. Let's give you 3 months to cut the fraud in half and see what happens. So it took 6 weeks, and we cut the fraud. It was a little bit more than half. It was like, we got it down from like 25% down to 11%. And all of a sudden, clients started calling, what are you doing?
Yeah.
My conversions are higher, double my order, spend more, like, give me a bigger budget. Like, all of a sudden they started seeing the benefits. So then in a completely different division, they're like, we're bought unsold on your product. You just turn it on. And
Yeah.
when we did the final case study with them, they reported by flipping the switch and turning our software on, their clients saw an immediate 20 to 25% increase in ROI.
That's fantastic.
They're a client for life. They ain't going anywhere.
Yeah. Amazing. This has been so juicy in terms of information, Rich. I mean, my mind is going in 100 directions. But last but not least, 3 tips that you can give somebody who is either a business owner, or an agency, or just about to step into doing any kind of marketing, that you could support with.
All right. So from the entrepreneurial side,
Yeah.
my one thing is don't hire friends.
Yeah.
That's the first thing every entrepreneur wants to do.
Yeah.
You're getting into business. Oh, I'm going to take my best friend. We get along great
Yeah.
until you don't. I've lost my closest friends because when it came time to be the boss,
Yeah.
which was the right decision for the business,
Yeah.
it was a bad decision for the friend relationship and lost a friend. So question, just take it out of the equation. Don't hire friends.
Yeah.
Number 2, if you're getting involved in digital marketing, you need to use a fraud solution. Otherwise, you're going to be basically chasing bad data. So if you're
Yeah.
making good decisions based on bad data, you're going to get a bad result. So make sure you have a certified fraud solution, and not just SOC 2 certified. I'm talking about either MRC accredited or tag certified against fraud.
Yeah.
At least you know at minimum they're running the standard process they're supposed to be running, and then sign up with 3 or 4 of them and play the test and see which one
Yeah.
works best for you.
Yeah. Because also, Rich, this can, just from a digital standpoint, this is also supported and useful as it relates to organic SEO, correct?
Organic SEO, there's no benefit for somebody. I'll give you another interesting story. There's
Yeah.
no benefit because they're not getting paid, right? It's earned. I used to say it's free traffic, but then I heard it said by somebody else it's earned traffic, because I'm like, yeah, I spend a fortune for this free traffic. It's not
Yeah.
free.
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
it's
you're paying
earned
somebody
traffic.
to do it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
earned traffic.
Yeah.
There's the right term for that. But my first use case of Anura
Yeah.
was I had a client who said, I love your technology. Can I use it outside your system? Because I'm having problems with my organic traffic. I'm like,
Yeah.
organic traffic has no benefit. Why would they do it? So I basically jerry-rigged our system and shoehorned it into his process. And it was our first beta test of the system outside of our network.
Yeah.
And sure enough, his organic traffic had a 30% fraud. And once we eliminated the fraud, all of a sudden the conversion ratios went. He was great. And I'm like, you know what? That was my first thought. This might be a good product outside of our network.
Yeah.
Because originally I said, hey, if you want clean traffic, just buy it from us. But that was being naive. Like, there's so many other channels that people want to use, and we didn't have all the traffic in the world. So, I mean, that was a good case of it. So
Yeah.
most organic traffic is generally under 5% fraud. There are
Mhm.
bots that run around that
Yeah.
click on organic links just to build social profiles so they can go commit fraud later.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, organic traffic is generally clean enough. But if you suspect something, test it out.
Yeah.
Doesn't cost anything.
Okay, so we went through entrepreneurial tip 1, don't hire your friends. If you're about to enter into digital marketing, you gave us the tips on that. Call Rich. And then the third one.
I just picked this up after being in digital marketing for the last 31 years. Is having a retained earnings account when you're
Okay.
building a business.
Yeah.
We never did that before, and it was just something I heard on a podcast about a retained earnings account. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. So you have a little account, and let's say at the end of the month you close your books and you got, I don't know, a chunk of profit. Take a percentage of that profit, like 20% or something like that, and just throw it in retained earnings, and just let that build up. And because what ends up happening is all of a sudden an opportunity comes along, and you're like, man, I wish I had the money to try that out, like a new marketing technique or a new advertising location. And all of a sudden you turn around, you got this retained earnings account that's like itching to be invested and deployed and help you grow your business. So it's something that I just learned probably in the last couple of months, and started doing it with our own company. And it's peace of mind knowing there's a nice chunk of money sitting there for any time I come up with some crazy idea that we want to try. We sit down together as a leadership team, we talk about it, we approve it, and then we have the money to do it. It's not like we're trying to go out and now have to go get an investor or pull money out of our own account. Like, it's just, you don't think about it. And what happens is when you don't have that account separate, the money just kind of bleed in together and just gets spent. It's kind of like most people when they have cash in their pocket.
Yeah.
It magically disappears.
Yeah.
Like, they don't know why, but it's so easy to spend cash because you just don't think about it. But that's my other piece of advice.
Very interesting. And before I let you go, the name Anura.
Yes. So our first company was a company called Ezanga.
Mm-hmm.
And when we did it, we wanted to have, I told my wife, let's make it a fun site, a B2C type site. and let's come up with a mascot. And we
Mm-hmm.
came up. We lived on Frog Hollow Golf Course
Mm-hmm.
here in Middletown, Delaware.
Yeah.
So the frog became, and there was a whole story behind it. But and long story short, the mascot became a frog. So when we were building this, we wanted an old school name for the company. And for me, old school is in the 90s
Mm-hmm.
when businesses were first starting. They didn't have like WeGenerateLeads.com. Like the name didn't describe anything they did.
Yeah.
It was some kind of weird name like Yahoo,
Yeah.
Google, Bing,
Yeah.
like these weird names that just you build over time. So we wanted something similar to that, but we also wanted something to tie back to our original company. So my wife came up with the name. We were at a trade show in Vegas and we're going through all these names, and all of a sudden she finds Anura. And I'm like, it's only 5 letters.
Yeah.
Can we get that? And we were able to get the .io initially, and then later on,
You bought the
long
.com.
process, we bought the .com. But and Anura is the classification of a frog in the animal kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
So if you actually look up Anura, you'll see frogs all over the page.
Yeah.
We come up a lot because we do a lot of SEO.
Yeah.
But that's where it came from, and it's just a short name, 5 characters. It's just a nice name. It just has a different name to it.
Yeah, I love it. This has been fantastic, Rich. I will link your website at the bottom of this so folks can contact you. And everyone, if they want to connect with Rich, his last name is Kahn. You can find him on LinkedIn as well. I appreciate the time, Rich. This has been really informative.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise.